Microsoft actually isn't sorry about Starfield not coming to PS5. We have some hints on Insomniac's next game, and is your PS5 starting to make some weird noises? We might have figured it out. So we all know with the console war between Sony and Microsoft right now, the biggest hit that Microsoft has had on Sony lately, other than Game Pass of course, is the fact that they picked up ZeniMax Studios and with it Bethesda Game Studios, which presumably means Elder Scrolls 6 and Starfield. After the announcement was officially made, people at Bethesda like Todd Howard and Pete Hines were doing interviews with a bunch of different websites, and Pete Hines made a statement that was taken completely kind of out of context, where he said he was sorry to people who were excited to play Starfield on PS5 and now realize that they can't play it because it's on Xbox. The way he was actually saying it in the interview was like, yeah, it's an exclusive, sorry, like you might just have to go out and buy an Xbox, but when you write it down and you take out the audio and the way he was actually saying it, it makes it seem like he's apologizing to PlayStation gamers for it being an exclusive. That interview was followed up very soon after with a conversation between Aaron Greenberg, who's like the Pete Hines of Xbox, where he said, it's okay, dude, you don't have to talk about being sorry or whatever, I know you weren't saying it, I'm not sorry, because now we have a huge exclusive with Starfield, and I don't think Xbox is in the wrong at all here. Like, no one should be apologizing to PlayStation for making a good business move. I love PlayStation, but I also have a PC, so I'm going to end up playing Starfield over there, and PlayStation doesn't apologize when they get stuff like Spider-Man. Spider-Man's the most popular superhero on planet Earth, and I know Sony owns the movie rights to Spider-Man, but they don't have the game rights to Spider-Man. Marvel made that decision on their own to let Sony buy exclusivity for the PS4 Spider-Man game. I mean, at the time, they didn't even own Insomniac. So Sony did what they do with the MLB, where they just paid for exclusivity on that game so that they would develop a full, good first-party game. And that's kind of what Microsoft is doing here. This whole Microsoft buying Bethesda situation also just plays into their overall larger strategy, which is that they're trying to get a bunch of good studios instead of investing into a few very insanely good ones. They've got the initiative that's making the Perfect Dark remake, and that looks pretty cool, right? I'm excited for that. But at the end of the day, you can look at Xbox and say, okay, I'm gonna play a game that might be a little buggier or something that I'm familiar with. There's a fly flying around, like Starfield or Elder Scrolls or something like that, or Skyrim or The Evil Within 2, and those will be more different games with more features that might not work so well with each other. And then you can look at Sony and say, okay, I'm paying $70. I'm gonna get a fully cinematic experience like Ghost of Tsushima, where it's kind of like taking tropes from other people like Ubisoft or other open world games and just perfecting them and making them as good as possible. What you get on either console is essentially different, and they're both good in their own right. And so it's like, you just gotta consider what kind of gamer you are and pick your console accordingly. And I've mentioned this before, but you gotta look at Bethesda's history when it comes to Xbox and PlayStation. Skyrim is the only Elder Scrolls game that's ever been on PlayStation other than the Elder Scrolls Online. And even that version of Skyrim did not work very well, and it is still broken to this day on the PS3. And we all know that on PS4, both Skyrim and Fallout 4 had issues where Sony wouldn't allow Bethesda to let people download mods for those games because I guess they wanted to keep it high quality, or they didn't want to let people learn how to hack the PS4 through mods. There's all that stuff. So really, what are you losing by all of these Bethesda games going to Xbox? Not a whole lot. One of the biggest shifts that Sony had as a company with the launch of the PS4 was making sure it came out first in the United States rather than their home country of Japan. And since then, the games they've been making have been following that trend, all the way up to the point where they've actually completely restructured their Japan studio and basically closed it down, other than Team Asobi, who make stuff like Astro's Playroom. And one thing that's for sure is that they're definitely feeling the effects of these decisions they've been making for the past 2 generations over in Japan. Because even though PS5s are selling out everywhere over in that country, the games that are coming out on it are pretty much just sitting on store shelves. Out of the 9 million PS5s that have sold at this point, 700,000 of them have been purchased in Japan, which is actually about 40,000 higher than the PS4 sold at this point in time in that country. But people aren't buying the games for it, which is kind of confusing. Like Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, which is pretty much the biggest game of June, only managed to sell 150,000 copies in Japan. Now, I think one of the main reasons people are assuming this is the case is because scalpers are actually ending up buying a lot of the PS5s in Japan, and maybe they're selling them in other countries, or they're just sitting on the stock waiting for the price to keep going up and up before they sell them, or just people aren't really buying from scalpers, so they're just sitting at scalpers' houses. And I guess that could be true, but when you look at the games that have been coming out for the PS5, like Returnal, like Ratchet & Clank, like Demon's Souls, these are all very westernized games that are made for American and European audiences, and I just don't think people in Japan are really caring all that much about Ratchet & Clank. Especially when you look at how many units the Nintendo Switch has sold over there, which is absolutely insane. And when you look at the output of the Nintendo Switch, there's tons of JRPGs, you've got Shin Megami Tensei 5, you've got the remake of Shin Megami Tensei 3, you've got tons of Japanese Japanese-oriented games coming out on the Nintendo Switch. So if they're tripping over themselves to buy that console, it kind of makes sense why games aren't selling so well on the PS5. Now, if Sony was putting in the time to develop games that were aimed at Japanese audiences and those weren't selling well, that might be a problem. But obviously, since the beginning of the PS4 generation, Sony has been aiming at the Western audiences, and it seems like it's paid off because Sony's PS5 is selling incredibly well over here. One of my favorite consoles to talk about here on the channel is the PlayStation Vita, but man, I feel like every time I bring it up lately, it's for something bad. So we all know the story over the past few months was that along with the PS3 store, Sony was also going to shut down the Vita store over the summer, but so many developers and fans of the Vita complained that Sony said, okay, we'll keep the store open for now, but they're taking away some features. Now, a few features have gone away at this point, like I don't think you can download a lot of PS3 game patches anymore, but on the Vita side, one thing Sony just took away was messages. So if you've ever sent PSN messages or done party chat or anything like that on your Vita, not only can you not do that anymore, but it seems like Sony has just basically cleared them from their servers. So they might be stored on your Vita, and you won't be able to get messages on your PSN account if you're using your Vita. At this point, I don't really think it's worth getting too upset at Sony over this because they are trying to sunset the Vita, and it's just been around so long that they aren't really doing anything with it. So leaving ways open to get onto the PSN through the back end, which seems like something you could do with messages if you were a good hacker, just seems like a mistake on Sony's part, because we definitely don't need the PSN shutting down again like it did so many years ago. Unfortunately, it seems like instead of making a brand new handheld, Sony is going all in on people streaming games to their phones, but we can just hold out hope that people complaining about features being shut down on the Vita actually shows Sony that people want to see more handheld games coming out of that company and more handheld gaming consoles, because we all know Sony can compete with Nintendo Switch. It just doesn't seem like they really want to right now. Except for Naughty Dog, I don't think I'm going to upset anyone by saying that Sony's biggest studio right now is definitely Insomniac Games. They put out the best games that we played on PS5 so far, from Spiderman Miles Morales all the way down to Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, which is crazy considering the PS5 has not even been out for a year at this point, and Insomniac's already managed to pump out 2 games. Everyone's wondering what they're working on now to put out next because they're a first-party studio, which means they could have an even bigger game than we've seen before. Obviously, we all know that they're working on Spider-Man 2, but there could be some more stuff in the works, and that's exactly what I think this tweet they put out is teasing. The tweet said that Insomniac is looking to hire people who have worked on multiplayer games before, which basically says that they're working on a multiplayer game. Now, no one knows if this is like doing co-op in Spider-Man 2, where one person can play as Peter and one person can play as Miles, or if this is a whole new game that's going to be a multiplayer shooter more akin to like Ratchet & Clank. But either way, it's cool to see that they're not slowing down even though they've already put out 2 games for the PS5. I'm not exactly sure how much I would like a co-op Spider-Man game. I'd really want them to just focus a single player story on both Spider-Men. Like you play a little bit as Peter and you play a little bit as Miles and their stories come together, kind of like Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart did with Rivet and Ratchet, you know? But if there was maybe like a co-op horde mode or something, like going into the Spider-Verse and doing combat encounters with a friend playing as Miles, I think that could actually turn out pretty cool. I mean, honestly, they've got Silk, they've got Spider-Woman, they've got Miles, they've got all these different characters they could play around with to make a multiplayer Spider-Man game, but I'm not willing to bet just yet that they're going to go that far with Spider-Man. But yeah, if you want to work in the games industry, I would go check out Insomniac's Twitter because they're actually hiring for quite a few different roles. Since the PS5 came out, one of the biggest issues people have had with it is that Sony is using 2 different fans in the console. One of them spins a little bit faster and therefore is a little bit louder than the other one, and thankfully no games have really taken advantage of the fan to the point where it's spinning so fast that you can actually hear it. But I don't think the console's been out long enough for a widespread error to really show up until now. Some PS5 users are complaining that their console has a symptom called coil whine, which is basically a noise you hear that's very high pitched when your fan spins up really fast. So initially people were complaining that they thought their PS5 had coil whine, which is a hard problem to fix that I don't really understand, but some people who heard about the issue took their PS5 apart and realized that it's not actually coil whine. So basically what the issue came down to is that once these people took the fan out of their PS5, they realized that there was a sticker on the side of the fan's casing that would come unstuck, and then it would hit the fan as it was spinning up. So if you were a kid who had a bike and you ever took a Pokemon card and put it in the spokes of your wheels so that it would sound like a motorcycle, that's essentially what's happening when the fan spins up. It's hitting a sticker and it's spinning so fast that it sounds like coil whine. So if you're getting an issue where when you turn on your PS5 or you start playing a game and your fan starts spinning up and you're hearing a whining noise from the inside of the console, your first thing you should do is just try to pop the fan out and see if that sticker came unstuck in your PS5. But yeah, between stick drift, the fan noise, and now this coil whine thing, it seems like the PS5 is a little shaky in terms of how it's put together. So maybe if you haven't gotten one yet, you might want to hold out for the PS5 Slim. Alright guys, that's all the PS5 news I have for you today. Make sure you let me know what you think down in the comments below. And remember to stay PS ready, subscribe, and set your notifications to all. As always, guys, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.